The Federation's central hospital was unlike any other in the galaxy. It was a place where beings from hundreds of different worlds came for healing, guided by advanced alien medical technology. From the smallest insectoid to the tallest giants, every species had its own specialized care. Yet, when the dragon-like creature arrived, things quickly turned chaotic. The creature was huge, its scales shimmered in shades of dark green and black, and its eyes glowed with a strange, ancient light. Its body was coiled in a way that seemed unnatural, its wings folded tightly against its sides. Despite the creature's size and terrifying appearance, it was clear that something was wrong. The dragon, whose name was Virax, had been traveling for weeks, injured and sick, searching for help. But the moment it entered the hospital, it met rejection. No one knew what Virax was, and no one knew how to treat it. Every alien medic in the hospital had either seen the creature and backed away or declared that it was too dangerous to even attempt a diagnosis. Most species in the Federation had heard of dragons but considered them myths, ancient beasts that had long disappeared from the galaxy. One medic, Azarian, tried to get close to Virax, but the dragon let out a low, rumbling growl that sent the medic stumbling back. Too dangerous, the Azarian muttered, shaking its head. It's cursed. We cannot treat it. The hospital's director, a tall and calm loony, walked past the gathering crowd of frightened medics. She stopped at the entrance to the emergency bay where Virax was laying, breathing shallowly. "What are you all waiting for?" she asked, her voice calm but stern. The alien medics exchanged nervous glances. Then one of them spoke. "We can't treat it. We've never seen anything like it before. It's too foreign. The scans show irregularities that none of our technology can handle." The director frowned. "Then what do you propose we do? Leave it to die?" The room fell silent. It was clear no one had an answer. Just then, a figure stepped forward from the back of the room. It was a human, Eli, wearing the simple white medic uniform that seemed out of place among the alien doctors and nurses. He had been working on the station for a few months now, known for his quick thinking and hands-on approach. Unlike the others, Eli was not intimidated by the unknown. He had a reputation for being resourceful, even when faced with the most impossible cases. "I'll help," Eli said, his voice calm but firm. The room went still. Everyone turned to look at him. A human? The other medics knew that Eli had no experience with alien creatures. His knowledge was limited to human anatomy and healing. But he had saved more lives than they could count. Still, this was a dragon, something entirely different. The director raised an eyebrow. "You believe you can treat it?" Eli nodded without hesitation. "I'll try." The alien medics exchanged uneasy glances, but they all knew they had no other choice. The dragon was too weak to move, and it looked like it was dying. With a resigned sigh, the director stepped aside and motioned for Eli to go ahead. Eli approached Virax cautiously, his eyes scanning the creature's massive form. He could see the dragon's scales were covered in dark patches, and its breathing was labored. The wings, which were usually strong and majestic, hung limply at its sides. The dragon's eyes met his, glowing with a deep sadness that was impossible to ignore. There was something almost human in the way Virax looked at him, as if it had lost all hope. Eli crouched down, keeping a respectful distance, and pulled out his medical kit. "I'm not sure of what's going on with you, but I'll figure it out," he murmured under his breath. At first, the dragon didn't move. Virax's eyes were heavy, and it looked as though it were ready to give up. But as Eli worked, carefully checking its vital signs and using equipment to scan its body, he could feel something stirring. There was a quiet energy in the air, a strange connection between him and the creature. He carefully applied a healing gel to the wounds along Virax's scales, watching as the gel began to slowly mend the damaged skin. His hands were steady, even though every instinct told him to step back. This was no ordinary patient. But Eli had learned over the years that medicine was not just about knowing the science. It was about understanding the patient, no matter how alien they were. As he worked, Virax's breathing became slightly less strained. Eli could feel the creature's attention turning toward him. There was something different about the dragon. It wasn't like the other patients he had treated. This was something ancient, powerful. Eli wondered, for the first time, if he could actually help it. Minutes turned to hours, and slowly, Eli began to piece together a picture of what was happening. The dragon's body seemed to be rejecting the treatment. The strange biology was unlike anything Eli had seen, but he refused to give up. Every time a medic tried to tell him to stop, he just shook his head. "I've come this far. I'm not quitting now." The hospital's director watched from the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she observed Ellie's determination. She had seen many medics come and go, but none had ever taken on a case like this. It was as if Eli was trying to prove something, not just to the medics, but to himself as well. His decision to treat the dragon, despite all the risks, was something that set him apart from the others. After hours of careful treatment, the dragon's eyes flickered. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that the creature was beginning to respond. Eli allowed himself a small smile. "We're getting somewhere." The director nodded, impressed by his resilience. "You might just be the one to save it," she said quietly, though she had no idea just how true those words would become. As the dragon's breathing steadied, Eli knew that this was only the beginning. The road to recovery would be long, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He had made a promise to help, and no matter what it took, he would keep that promise. Eli had never faced a challenge like this before. As he sat by Virax's side in the quiet corner of the Federation Hospital's emergency wing, the dragon's breathing slowly became less erratic. But the creature was still far from healed. It lay there, its massive form barely moving, while Eli continued to tend to its wounds. The dragon's scales, which had once glowed with strength and power, were now dulled and damaged, as though the life had been drained out of it. For the first few hours, there had been no change. Eli had applied several healing gels, used the advanced medical scanners to check for internal damage, and even injected a special serum designed to stabilize alien life forms. But it hadn't worked. Virax's body was rejecting the treatments, and there was still no clear answer as to why. Eli was frustrated. He had treated hundreds of patients during his time as a medic, from minor cuts and bruises to life-threatening injuries. But dragons were unlike anything he had ever worked on. Their bodies were vast and complex, filled with mysteries that no human medicine could solve on its own. Yet, there was something about Virax that tugged at him, something that made him refuse to give up. As the night passed and the soft hum of the hospital's machines filled the air, Eli leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. He glanced at the dragon, wondering how much longer it could survive like this. The other medics had already stopped coming by to check on Virax, convinced that it was a hopeless case. They had returned to their work, leaving Eli alone with the creature. But Eli didn't mind the solitude. He was used to working alone, and he knew that sometimes the best answers came when no one else was around to rush you. Still, as he watched the dragon, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this creature than just physical wounds. Virax's eyes slowly opened, revealing the faint, glowing light within. The dragon's gaze fixed on Eli, and for a moment, Eli felt like the creature was studying him. It wasn't the usual cold, unfeeling stare that most animals gave. There was intelligence in those eyes, something that told Eli this was not just a wild beast. This was a creature with history, with wisdom, and with a story that had yet to be told. Eli took a deep breath. "You're not just sick, are you?" he murmured. The words felt silly, almost absurd, but there was a strange sense of knowing in his chest. He had to ask. He had to understand. The dragon's deep, rumbling voice echoed in Ellie's mind, startling him. "I am broken," Virax thought, the words sharp and full of pain. "My body is weak, but it is not the only thing that suffers." Eli jumped back, blinking in surprise. He had never experienced anything like this before. He had heard of telepathic communication, especially between certain species. But this was different. It was like Virax's mind was speaking directly to his own, bypassing language and reaching into the depths of his thoughts. I didn't know you could talk like that," Eli said, his voice low. He could feel the weight of Virax's sadness in his words. This was no ordinary injury. It wasn't just about physical healing. There was something deeper, something more painful. Virax's eyes flickered. I have lost everything. My people, my world. I am the last of my kind. There is nothing left for me to return to. Ellie's heart went out to the dragon. He had heard stories about dragons, ancient creatures that once roamed the galaxy in great numbers. They were protectors, guardians of peace. But something had happened to them. A terrible war, a fall from grace. And now, it seemed that Virax was the only one left. I'm sorry, Eli whispered, his voice full of empathy. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like to lose everything, to be the last of your kind, to carry that kind of weight. But you're not alone now. I'm here. Virax's gaze softened slightly, though the sadness didn't fade. You do not understand. My heart is broken. My spirit is lost. No healing will ever make me whole again. Eli sat up straighter, a thought forming in his mind. He had seen soldiers come back from war, broken and battered, with no hope left in their eyes. Sometimes, all it took was a little time, a little care, and a little belief in them. He had done it before. He could do it again. You're wrong, Eli said, his voice more certain now. I don't know your pain, but I know this. Healing isn't just about fixing your body. Sometimes, it's about fixing your spirit. And if anyone can help you with that, it's me. Virax's gaze seemed to soften even further. It was a small change, but Eli noticed it. There was a flicker of something, maybe hope. Maybe it was just a fleeting moment of trust. Eli couldn't be sure, but he was going to try. The next few hours were spent in silence. Eli continued to tend to Virax's wounds, applying more healing gels and using his basic knowledge of dragon anatomy to try and stabilize the creature's body. It was slow work, and progress was minimal. But Eli wasn't discouraged. He wasn't ready to give up just yet. Round on. As the first rays of light filtered through the hospital's windows, Virax stirred again. This time, Eli was ready. The dragon's eyes flickered open once more, and there was something different about the way it looked at him. Less fear, more curiosity. You're going to be all right, Eli said quietly. We'll figure this out, together. Virax's voice echoed in his mind again. But this time it was softer, more hopeful. You are unlike the others. You do not fear me. You do not turn away. Perhaps. There's more to your kind than I believed. Eli smiled softly, a small, quiet victory. Maybe there is. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet care and constant observation. Eli hardly left Virax's side. Each morning, he would arrive early, running tests and applying treatments. By the time the sun set, he would be exhausted, but there was no stopping him. His connection with the dragon had grown deeper than he had expected. It wasn't just about the medicine anymore, it was about understanding Virax's suffering. Something beyond his physical wounds died at first. It had been challenging. Virax's massive body was filled with strange toxins and foreign substances that human medicine couldn't fully counteract. The dragon's biology was complex, far more advanced than anything Eli had encountered before. Yet, with every hour that passed, Eli found himself understanding the creature better. It wasn't just about fixing the damage. He had to understand Virax's mind. Eli spent hours sitting with the dragon, talking to him in a soft voice. Sometimes Virax would remain quiet, his eyes staring into nothing, his wings folded tightly against his body. But other times, the dragon would speak, not in words, but through thought. At first, it had startled Eli, but over time, he became more comfortable with it. The telepathic link was both strange and comforting, allowing them to communicate in a way that words never could. I do not wish to burden you, Virax had thought to him one evening, his voice heavy with weariness. I am broken beyond repair. Eli had sat down beside the dragon, brushing his hand over the scales as he spoke. No one's beyond repair. Maybe it's not about fixing everything. Maybe it's just about taking it one step at a time. I can help you. We'll figure this out together. Virax had let out a soft, rumbling sigh, and for the first time, there had been no anger, no bitterness in his thoughts. Only sadness. Slowly, Eli began to notice small improvements in Virax's condition. The dragon's scales, which had been dull and damaged, were beginning to regain their natural sheen. The deep gashes along his body had started to close, the bleeding slowing down. While the healing was far from complete, it was enough for Eli to feel a glimmer of hope. But the changes weren't just physical. As the days passed, Eli realized that the dragon was beginning to open up in other ways. Virax's thoughts, which had been clouded with sorrow and loss, were becoming clearer. And with that clarity came stories, fragments of memories from a long and troubled past. One morning, as Eli carefully examined Virax's wings, the dragon spoke again, his voice quiet but steady. I was once a protector. My kind. We guarded the worlds of the ancient galaxy, bringing peace where there was war. But the wars tore us apart. We fought against the very ones we swore to protect. Eli paused, his hands gently resting on Virax's massive wing. What happened? How did you end up here? Virax's thoughts darkened, and there was a long silence before he responded. The invaders came, a race of beings who fed on power, who tore apart civilizations to gain control. They destroyed my homeworld, my family. My kind fought back, but we were too few. The war lasted for centuries. In the end, we were scattered. I am the last. Eli felt the weight of those words settle in his chest. He had heard of the ancient wars, of civilizations lost to time, but he had never imagined they had caused so much. Virax was more than just a creature of myth. He was a living testament to the past, to a time of glory that had long since vanished. I'm sorry, Eli whispered, his voice soft and sincere. I had no idea, but you're not alone now. You've got me, and I'm not going anywhere. Virax's eyes softened at Ellie's words, and for the first time in what seemed like ages, the dragon's voice carried a note of gratitude. You are unlike any other. You do not fear me. You see me for what I am, not a monster, but a soul that has endured. Eli smiled gently. I don't see a monster. I see a warrior, someone who's been through a lot. But you're still here. You've survived, and you've got a chance to heal. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. Eli didn't just treat Virax's injuries. He listened to his stories, heard his pain, and offered whatever comfort he could. Every word from the dragon added a piece to the puzzle of his past, and each day, Eli found himself more determined to help him recover. On the fourth day of treatment, something remarkable happened. Virax began to stir, his massive wings twitching as if testing their strength. Eli rushed to his side, watching as the dragon slowly, cautiously lifted his head. The dragon's eyes met his, and there was something different about the way Virax looked at him. It was no longer the look of fear or bitterness. It was a look of trust. How are you feeling? Eli asked, his voice full of hope. Virax's telepathic voice resonated in Ellie's mind. Better. The pain is less. The healing. It is slow, but it is there. Eli nodded. That's good. You're getting stronger every day. The dragon shifted slightly, testing his limbs. His wings stretched out, their massive span filling the room. It wasn't full strength, but it was progress. Virax seemed to grow more aware of his surroundings, more focused. His once dull eyes now glimmered with something new. Hope. Eli felt a surge of pride. He had helped. He hadn't fixed everything, but he had made a difference. And in a way, that was enough. Virax shifted again, his massive form lifting slightly. There was a new energy in his movements, a spark of life that hadn't been there before. The dragon's voice spoke again, quieter this time, but with an undeniable sense of respect. You are the first human to ever offer me this kindness. You are the first to see me as more than a weapon. Ellie's heart swelled with emotion. He had always believed that compassion was the greatest healer of all. And now, here he was, standing beside a creature who had known only war, offering the one thing it needed most, understanding. You're not a weapon, Eli said softly. You're a living being, just like me, and I'm going to help you get back to being the protector you were meant to be. Virax's eyes, once filled with sorrow, now glinted with something else, determination. I will fight again. For those who cannot fight for themselves, Eli smiled, watching as the dragon slowly began to rise to his feet. That's the spirit. Virax's recovery was slow but steady. Each day brought new signs of life as scales regained some of their lost shine, and his once drooping wings were beginning to stretch out and flap with more confidence. Eli watched with growing hope as the dragon's strength returned. Though the road ahead was still uncertain, however, it wasn't just Virax's body that was healing. Something else had begun to shift. The dragon, who had once been a broken shell of anger and sadness, now seemed more aware of his surroundings. The pain in his eyes had lessened, replaced by a glimmer of determination. But despite his improvement, something still lingered. A heaviness in the air that Eli couldn't ignore. Virax wasn't fully whole yet. Eli knew the key to Virax's recovery wasn't just physical, it was psychological. The dragon had carried the weight of centuries of war and loss, and Eli realized it would take more than medical treatments to restore him. There was an emotional wound that needed healing, a scar deeper than anything visible on his body. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the hospital's lights cast long shadows across the room, Eli sat with Virax again. He had been working nonstop to help the dragon heal, but tonight, he decided it was time for a different approach. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Eli said softly, sitting beside Virax's massive form. "You lost your people, your home, your purpose. But that doesn't mean it's over." Virax shifted, his great head turning toward Eli. His glowing eyes were tired, but there was a new softness in them, as if they were beginning to accept what Eli was saying. "I have lost everything." Virax's voice resonated in Ellie's mind. "My kind is gone. The war took them all. I am the last, and I have no place left to belong." Eli felt a pang of sadness, but he wasn't ready to give up. "You're wrong," he said firmly. "You're not alone. You've got me, and you've got a chance to start over. You can choose what comes next." Virax's wings twitched as if he was considering Ellie's words. For a long time, there was silence between them. Eli waited, patient as always. Then, finally, Virax spoke again, his voice quieter than before. "I don't know if I can trust again." Virax confessed. "Trust was shattered in the war. My kind fought, bled, and died for others, only to be betrayed in the end." Eli nodded slowly, understanding the dragon's fear. "I get it. Trust is hard when you've been hurt, when you've lost so much. But you don't have to do this alone anymore." There was a long pause before Virax's voice came again, softer than before. "I have spent so many years alone. I do not know what it means to have someone to trust." Eli reached out, placing a hand gently on the dragon's side. His touch was small in comparison to the dragon's massive body, but it was a sign and offering of comfort. "I'm here. I promise you, I'll never betray you. I'll help you find your purpose again." The room grew quiet. The only sound the soft hum of the medical machines and the gentle breathing of the dragon. Slowly, Virax shifted, carefully moving his large body into a more comfortable position. His wings unfurled, stretching out fully for the first time in what seemed like forever. There was something new in the dragon's posture, a sense of readiness. It was as though Virax was testing his strength, allowing himself to believe, just for a moment, that he could rise again. Eli stood back, giving Virax space. He had seen this before: soldiers who were broken, who felt they had lost everything, but slowly began to stand tall again. The journey wasn't easy, but it was always possible. Virax lifted his head, his gaze fixed on the ceiling of the hospital room. His chest rose and fell with deeper breaths, and for the first time, he seemed more than just a creature on the mend. He was a warrior once again, ready to fight for something more than survival. "I was once a protector," Virax said, the words full of strength and purpose now. "I was meant to guard, to fight for others. I forgot that. But you remind me of who I was." Eli smiled. "You're still that protector. You're just finding your way back." With renewed determination, Virax slowly began to stand. His legs trembled slightly, the effort of supporting his enormous body still taxing. But there was a steady resolve in his movements. Eli watched in awe as the dragon rose to his full height, wings stretching wide. Virax looked down at Eli, his eyes gleaming with a newfound strength. "I can fight again, not just for survival, but for something more." Eli nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "That's right, And you're not alone. You've got me, and you've got the whole Federation behind you." It was then that Eli realized just how much he had come to care for this creature. He had not only healed Virax's body, but he had also helped restore the dragon's spirit. They had both been through their own wars, their own battles against the horrors of war, and Virax's against loss and betrayal. But together, they had begun to rebuild, to find something worth fighting for. But their journey wasn't over yet. Virax was stronger, yes, but there was still much to be done. The Federation's enemies, who had once destroyed Virax's home, were still out there. And now that Virax had regained his strength, he was determined to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "You're ready," Eli said softly, his voice full of pride. Virax's wings beat the air once, powerful and strong. "I will fight, I will protect, and I will honor those who have fallen." Eli stepped back as the dragon moved toward the hospital's open bay doors. The sound of the dragon's powerful wings echoed through the room. It was time for Virax to take flight once more, to reclaim the purpose that had been stolen from him long ago. Eli stood there for a moment, watching as the dragon took to the skies. It was a beautiful sight, one that symbolized hope, rebirth, and the power of healing. The journey had been long, but it was only just beginning. "Go," Eli whispered, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "Go and be the protector you were always meant to be." Virax's powerful form disappeared into the sky, a figure of strength and grace. And in that moment, Eli knew that the bond between them was unbreakable. Together, they had faced the impossible, and together, they would continue to fight. The sky was clear as Virax soared above the Federation's central station, the massive wings cutting through the air with graceful power. Eli stood on the ground below, watching the dragon as he flew. There was something beautiful about the sight. The once broken creature that had landed at the hospital weeks ago, barely able to move, now glided effortlessly, fully restored. It was more than just physical healing. It was a transformation. Eli had spent so much time by Virax's side, working tirelessly to restore him, that he hadn't realized just how much the dragon's recovery had impacted him, too. The bond they had formed was stronger than anything he had ever experienced. He was no longer just a medic trying to save a wounded animal. He was a part of something bigger, a protector, just like Virax. And now, as the dragon circled high above, Eli couldn't help but feel proud of how far they had come together. "You've come a long way," Eli whispered to himself, watching Virax as he looked through the sky, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The dragon had regained more than just his strength, he had regained his will to fight. But the journey was far from over. Eli knew that, despite their progress, danger still loomed. The Federation's enemies, the ones who had destroyed Virax's home and driven him to the edge of despair, were still out there. And now, with Virax back in action, they would undoubtedly come for him again. But this time, it would be different. This time, they would be ready. The hospital had been buzzing with activity for days. Since Virax's recovery had begun, word of his healing had spread quickly throughout the Federation. Many had thought of the dragon as a myth and ancient creature from stories and legends. Now, they saw him as a powerful ally, someone who could protect them from the dangers that threatened their galaxy. Eli had been called to many meetings with Federation officials. At first, the medics and scientists had been skeptical, but now they were eager to hear about his treatment plan for Virax and any new techniques that might help heal other species. Eli had never expected to be in such high demand, but it felt good to be part of something so important. But amid the praise and gratitude, Eli had remained focused on one thing, Virax. As much as the Federation valued the dragon's strength, Eli knew that their enemies were planning something. They wouldn't let Virax's return go unchallenged. It was late one evening when Eli received the news. The Federation's intelligence network had intercepted a transmission from their enemies, an alien race known as the Khazar. They were ruthless, power-hungry species that had destroyed Virax's homeworld. And now, they had come to take revenge on the last surviving dragon. Eli immediately contacted Virax, his voice steady but urgent. "We need to act fast. The Khazar are on their way. They want you, and they're not going to stop until they have you." Virax's voice echoed in Ellie's mind, full of resolve. "I will not run. I will fight. But this time, I will not fight alone." The next few days were a whirlwind. The Federation quickly gathered its forces, preparing for the impending attack. Eli was busy organizing medical teams, making sure the wounded would be cared for once the battle began. But even with all the preparations, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Khazar were planning something far more dangerous than anyone realized. As Virax continued to train and regain his full strength, he often met with other powerful beings in the Federation. The dragons, once thought to be extinct, were not the only protectors. There were also the Zarians, a species of towering, armored warriors who had pledged their allegiance to the Federation. And there were the Nymari, a race of telepathic beings with the Abi,